Welcome to Evidence Based, a new Harbinger psychology podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Stossel. On today's episode, we're talking about building grit and resilience with Dr. Caren Baruch-Feldman, author of the Resilience Workbook for Kids. Caren is a clinical psychologist and a certified school psychologist. She maintains a private practice in Scarsdale, New York, and works as a school psychologist in Harrison, New York. She is also author of the Grit Guide for Teens. Baruch-Feldman has authored numerous articles and led workshops on topics such as cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, helping children and adults cope with stress and worry, helping people change, and developing grit and self-control. She is a fellow and supervisor in rational emotive behavior therapy, a type of CBT. Visit her online at www.drbaruchfeldman.com. Hi, Caren. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk about both of your books with us, specifically about grit and resilience. So I thought we could start off by just talking about what is grit and why is it so important?
Yeah, so I wrote the Grit Guide for Teens. And when I talk about grit, I really use Angela Duckworth's definition, which is grit is having passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And both things are important, having connection, making sure that that goal is important to you and it's a long-term goal. And to answer your question about why it's important, I think it's super important today because we live in like a really like fast food, fast everything, society. And I think it's very hard because most things are not long term. Like especially like when I was growing up, like I remember that Happy Days was, I'm dating myself, was like at 8 o'clock and Laverne and Shirley was at 8:30. And I had to wait till Thursday night to watch the show and watch the times. Whereas kids don't have that opportunity to wait. And so everything is like really like immediate gratification. So this notion of working towards the long term is really tough for kids. And it's not their fault. They don't even have that much experience with it. And often the things that are long term are really, really important. Like obviously, that cookie or that donut might taste delicious now, but that might not be in line with your goals and what you want. But so, as I said too, I feel like it's really important in these days to really help kids and adults, even adolescents, and everyone to deal with like more long-term goals.
Yeah, and I think obviously resilience plays into this conversation here. So how is grit different from resilience and why is resilience? Why does it matter?
Right. So, as I said, grit is the definition is to having like that passion for long term goals and being able to do that, where resilience is your ability to cope with stress. So, they are kind of different. Like, I also believe that most people, or all people really, are going to have stress in their life. And it's really incumbent for us to teach young people how to deal with that stress. So, it's that ability to bounce back, it's the ability to deal with stress in a productive way.
Yeah, and when in your work, what have you found to be the number one factor for resilience in children specifically?
So I think I always say this because I actually teach resilience to all the third graders in my school. I say to them all the time, if you learn one thing from me, I hope you learn this factor, which is that having support is the number one factor. Having what we call a charismatic adult, a person in your life, is the number one factor that when you're stressed, having that support is really what is so helpful to get through difficult times, and that teachers are in this great position. I know the job can be really tough, but one of the things that we can do as people who work in schools is we know that we can be that special person to a kid who maybe doesn't have that in their family or in their life, but we in school can be that to that child.
That support is so important even for adults as we're talking about resilience as well. It's such a crucial piece, and I feel like it's not really talked about as much as it should be. On the topic of resilience, before we dive a little more into grit, recently you had an op-ed about the California wildfires, and I wondered if you wanted to talk more about that and how resilience plays into that.
Right. So there was recently an article in the Times about the fires, and the headline was anxiety, PTSD, and all these things that were purported where people are going to be experiencing after the fires. And actually, if you read the article closely, it was only like 2%, 3%, and the numbers actually are very low because what we really know, and this is really based on George Bonanno's work, is that most people are resilient. And I think that that's an essential message to people to have, is that yes, it's awful like what's going on, and people are able when they deal with difficult times to find something, hopefully also because they get that support in their life, to kind of bounce back and sometimes grow and learn. And so I thought it was really important not only just to talk about what is maybe happening to some people, but rather to share with people in these really challenging times that people are resilient, and that if people want to be resilient, that the best way to do that is through support. And also being a helper is also something that can be really feel good at these times. I know in my school, a lot of times when I have kids who are stressed and they don't want to come into the building, or they're dealing with something difficult, I say to them, why don't you help me? Can you come to my office? I need help organizing, or I need help with like the second graders. Can you help me with the second graders? And they by helping other people, that can make you feel better, and it almost takes your mind off your troubles.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, since you're working with third graders, what are you seeing that, is coming in that's stressing them, and how do you, as an educator, as a person, talk to them about it as their support system?
Right. So I work in elementary school. So I see kids who are stressed even in kindergarten all the way to 5th grade. I see kids a lot of kids recently are stressed about health related issues. I don't remember that being like, even when I wrote the Grit Guide for Teens, which was in 2017, I don't remember that as much as like they have a lot of fear of throwing up. They have a fear of being sick. They have a fear of separating from their parents. They have a fear of a lot of like anxiety around like social relationships. They even get stressed about the schoolwork. All these things, I just think it's coming down to a much younger age. I don't remember like when, as I said, I was growing up like such young children really having like the weight of the world on their shoulders. But I definitely feel like kids are very stressed today.
Yeah. Oh, that's so upsetting. And I have a little sister-in-law. She's 9, and I was spending time with her, and she's really into this author, Raina Telgemeier, and she has a book. It's a graphic novel about the fear of throwing up. I had no idea, like that wasn't a thing, but that's so interesting that sounds like it's fairly common.
Yes, yes. And if, by the way, just a shout out, if you have a fear of throwing out, the most important thing you can say to a child is if you throw up, you throw up and then you feel better. So it's like a very much like an acceptance based and act kind of strategy. Like a lot of times the teacher will be like saying to the kids, don't worry, you won't throw up. I'm like, no, 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 we're not saying that to the children because they may throw up. You need to tell them if they throw up, they will throw up and they will feel better. And that their body's this amazing thing. Like they fart, they burp, they do all these things, and you throw up. And so it's like, of course, nobody wants to throw up, but if you need to throw up, it's a great thing that you have that in your body.
Yes. And going back to grit a little bit, in your book, you talk about a formula for grit. Can you talk more about that, and how does a positive approach really help grit grow?
Right. So in terms of grit, like sometimes I'll see kids and they'll be very gritty in one area. One of the things that I do in my book, The Grit Guide for Teens, and I got a lot of positive feedback about it, is I don't like lump all these different domains in one area. I talk about emotional grit and social grit and academic grit, because I will notice somebody can be really gritty about their academics, but not so much about their social. So it was sort of interesting to me, like, why is that? Like, what's going on there? And this formula definitely is true. So what I've noticed, and again, this is based on some of Duckworth's work and others, is that if the goal is important to you, if the costs feel low and your likelihood of success is high, you will be motivated and more likely to accomplish your grit goal. So let me be specific. Let's say, for example, like you have a kid who is does well in school. So and they love school. So they love school. So it's important to them. Their likelihood of success is good because they've been successful all along, and they don't mind doing schoolwork. It kind of doesn't bother them. They kind of like it. You see? Whereas that same individual, let's say they are really socially anxious, and so maybe it is important to them. Like they really wish that they had more relationships. So it's important to them. But they feel like putting themselves out there is the cost seems so high, and their success hasn't been so great, so they're not so optimistic that they're going to like be able to move the dial. So then when I work with them, or like what's talks about in the book, is then you got to tweak the formula. So then for me in that instance, maybe I would say to them, okay, So let's help you with the likelihood of your success. Let's do one small thing that you think you can do. So next time you walk in the hall, why don't you just like look at someone? So I give them something that's a small thing so that they can feel that their likelihood of success is higher. And then we talk about the cost. Like, I know you're saying that you think the costs are so high. Like, what's the worst thing that would happen if somebody doesn't acknowledge you with their eyes? Like, so then you don't see them again, like to help them. So I think that when you notice or you want to encourage young people to grow their grit goal, you need to look at that formula and say, okay, what part of the formula is not working for that person? And how do I help them in those specific areas?
And when you're working with them, how do you encourage them to sort of look at the areas where they can grow their grit?
So I think again, it goes back to connection. Like there has to, it can't be like, I think that this goal is important. We have to have a meeting of the minds. We both have to have agreement on the goal. So let's say there's somebody who recently I actually had somebody who that they are socially anxious. And it was interesting. So I've been working with them on a lot of different things, but we really haven't done social anxious. And they had gone to their psychiatrist. And when the psychiatrist had them fill out the form, they're like a questionnaire, everything was super elevated. And so the psychiatrist was like, I understand you've been working with Dr. Feldman. Like, why is this still elevated? And I said, to be quite honest, they've been avoiding these things this whole time. So we really have been working on it. So I guess it's like not like he's kind of presenting okay, but it's obviously a problem. So I said to him, I said, I spoke to the psychiatrist and the form was really high. And I think like that one, I'm not going to be a good doctor if I don't address that. Like, so I tried to like explain to him, like, you indicated that this was a problem. So trying to help him to feel like this was a little bit more important to him. Let's take something small. Like, what's one small thing we can do so that, again, he felt like he could accomplish that and it didn't feel so overwhelming?
Yeah. And as we're talking about developing that grit, you call it a gritty mindset. Can you talk about some other ways that we can develop that along with that long-term goal?
So I think in terms of gritty mindset, I think it's again helping young people understand that we're talking about long term. Like what this thing that we're talking about, like obviously, I think it's very important to explain to kids that when we avoid, like I said before, okay, so let's say for example, you have this goal about being more gritty socially, right? But you feel really nervous about it. So then what you do is you avoid. So what happens is you go and you think you want to do it, but then you avoid it and you're like, whew, I feel better. But what I try to tell the kids is that yes, I totally get why you're doing it. Cause like when you avoid, you feel better. But the problem is that it never really gets better. Every time that it happens, it goes up and then it even goes further up and it goes further up and you keep avoiding. So what I try to explain to them is that it is going to be a little uncomfortable, but I want them to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that when they get comfortable being comfortable, then they can approach this thing and it's going to slowly go down over time. But that the whole thing is that this is an exposure. It's going to feel uncomfortable and to have them understand like what this is going to look like and to also validate like I get why you're doing this because of course in the moment it feels good to avoid but in the long run it's not going to help you.
Yeah, and what are some common this kind of feels like it goes along with the idea of common thinking traps. What are some of those that you see that get in the way of resilience and how do you recommend people, kids to challenge those negative thoughts?
Right. So one thing I often say to kids is like, I'll say to them, like, if you were like a cartoon character and you had like a thought bubble over your head, like what would be the chatter that would be in your mind? And a lot of times I find the kids fall into the problematic P's. And even in third grade, I teach kids about the problematic P's. And those are big words, but we like learn big words in third grade. So they are making things personal, making things pervasive, and making things permanent. So let's say, like, just like to stick with that example about the social anxiety, because it's a good example. It's like if somebody walks by me and they don't see me, like taking it personal is like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why don't they like me? Making it pervasive is like, oh my God, this is the worst thing. It's terrible. I can't stand it. That's pervasive. And permanent is like, oh my God, this person hates me. They hate me now. They're gonna hate me when I'm in the nursing home. Like making it for like forever, right? So those are often like mindset or traps that people fall into. And what instead I encourage them to do is instead of making it personal, make it situational. So maybe when that person walked by, they're like having a bad day or they didn't notice you. So it's not about you, it's just like about the situation. Or instead of making it pervasive, just keeping it small. Like I call it, like instead of making it an elephant problem, making it an ant problem. Like, yes, it's a problem, but like there's all these other people who are friendly with you, and like your day's going to go by. And I often say, like, when you're 120 and you're reflecting on your life, you're going to say, oh my God, the worst thing that happened was that day that kid didn't look at me. No. And then permanent is like, instead of making it permanent, just keep it a moment in time. Like, this is just all we know from a factual point of view is this moment in time, this child did not look at you or didn't see you. And we don't know anything else. So all we know is that it's a moment in time.
Yeah, I'm also curious too. I want to ask about the parents and what are some ways that parents can help in this process for kids either developing gritty mindset or, cultivating their resilience? What are some like top things that you see that parents can do to help?
Well, I think also parents can learn about the problematic P's and they can model like not falling into it. I think that parents can also model about like fail. Fail is just your first attempt in learning so that they see challenges as part of the process. I think that parents can give the right type of support. Sometimes I like really very much Ellie Leibowitz's work from the space program. He talks about support having two parts, which is parents validating the child's feeling and on the same time encouraging them that they know as a parent that they can do hard things. So I think sometimes parents vacillate. They either are like, just suck it up like buttercup, or they're like, oh, so honey, you don't have to do that. It's too hard. I try to encourage them. And listen, I get it as a parent. I've definitely fallen into both those ends as well. But what you really want to encourage parents to do is both validate the feelings that the child has and also tell them that they see and they know in their heart that their child can do hard things. Not that the thing is going to be easy peasy, but rather that they know that life can be challenging and that they can do hard things. And even if it's like through tears or whatever, or it's difficult, they did it. Like they did a hard thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And as we're talking about, you mentioned failure. So I want to ask about what role failure plays in growth and developing grit, and what role does it play in building resilience as well?
Right. So I think that again, like especially in today's age with like social media, I think a lot of kids like see other people out there and think it's like rainbows and unicorns and everything is just, easy. I really say that anybody who's done anything really challenging, and I share this like with Thomas Edison, and there's all these examples of people who, really had a lot of challenges before they got to where they are. So that if they're not hitting challenges, then they're not doing really things that are really difficult, like and meaningful kinds of things. They're not like really pushing themselves a little bit. So I try to encourage them to like that fail is part of the process, and that there's like this iceberg illusion, which is that when we look at somebody, we just see the top. We don't see all the hard work or the perseverance. Nobody walks around, with a big sign saying, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time. I think again, like back to like, oh, with grit, one of the researchers I read was really talking like they call these things like these wise interventions. One thing that you can share with like college students as they go into school is this notion that everybody when they go to college like has difficulties. It's not easy. It's not easy meeting people. It's not easy doing the schoolwork, but people just don't walk around with a big sign and it gets better. So just letting kids know like that's the norm. Like it is difficult. There will be times that the road will be bumpy. That's what it looks like. And so that they don't feel like, why is this hard for me? Because when it feels hard for you only, that can be really difficult.
Yeah, and I know social media is getting younger and younger as well. Like you mentioned, you're only seeing that highlight reel, you're only seeing the successes and not everything it took to get there. So I'm thankful that I kind of just squeaked in the generation that didn't have phones when I was a kid, but that's got to be so hard. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew McKay, creator of Therapy Assist. We've designed Therapy Assist to be an accessible and efficient platform. By providing a library of thousands of resources and the ability to customize workbooks, we're putting evidence-based tools in your hand, helping to improve client outcomes. Research consistently shows that between-session homework can significantly improve client outcomes and reduce dropout. But finding the right tools to assign can be time-consuming. Therapy Assist makes this process faster and easier. You can search through a library of curated resources, including psychoeducation, worksheets, exercises, meditations, and much more. You can use these resources both during your sessions and as homework assignments for clients, all with the confidence that they are rooted in evidence-based therapies. Therapy Assist's resource library is built on the firm foundation of New Harbinger Publications' 50-plus years of pioneering work in self-help and psychology. So you'll have resources created by world-renowned psychologists and researchers right at your fingertips. Our platform makes it easy for you to find exactly what you need with search filters and curated protocols. These comprehensive tools provide you with the ability to search for a resource by any combination of therapy type, presenting problem, transdiagnostic mechanism, intervention, or resource type. Therapy Assist helps you support more clients between sessions in less time. I know therapists often spend hours searching through files, books, or online to find the resources they need. Therapy Assist takes care of this for you, saving you valuable time you can use to focus on what matters most, helping your clients heal and thrive. With Therapy Assist, you can also review completed resources ahead of time, which means you'll be fully prepared for each session, ready to make the most of your time with your client. We understand the importance of having access to the most effective client resources in your work, and we're committed to continuously updating our library to keep pace with the latest research and cutting-edge tools in the field. Your clients' privacy and security are top priorities for us. Therapy Assist is fully HIPAA compliant, so you can trust that the data entered is kept safe and confidential. To start your free trial and find out how Therapy Assist can transform your practice, go to therapyassist.com. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Let's talk about optimism. I want to know what an optimist looks like and what is different about their thinking, and what role does optimism play in both resilience and grit?
So optimism is a lot about, like we talked about before, about like those problematic P's. An optimist, like as I said, doesn't take things personal. They keep things small. They keep things in the moment. Versus pessimistic person, they think what's wrong with me, or they think that it's going to last forever, or that they make it into, as I said, like an elephant problem. And so for both, when you have a setback in grit, let's say, or a setback in resilience, how you're going to view that setback is really going to be really helpful about how you're going to move past it. If you feel like, oh my God, this is overwhelming, I can't do it, then how are you, are you going to pick yourself up, or I can't ask for support. What's wrong with me? No one's going to help me. Well, support is really helpful. Like, so in those moments, it's helpful to get support. Again, there's nothing wrong with support. I think that sometimes kids do think that if they ask for help, there's something wrong with them. And I think that that's also an important message to say no. Like, support is important. Also, feedback. I think, like a lot of kids, when the teacher gives them feedback today, they're like, oh my God. There's a new book, 10 to 25, that just came out by David Yeager. And he talks a lot about young people understanding their mindset, that at that age, kids like feel like there's like so much like oomph, like that everybody's looking at them and everybody's judging them. And so I feel like, especially with young people, you need to explain to them, like, I'm giving you feedback. It's called also kind of like wise feedback. I'm giving you feedback because I believe in you and I have high standards. So not like we're going to remove the high standards, and not that we're not going to also take away the support. But when we have support plus high standards, that's how we get like really great product.
Yeah, that makes sense. That feedback piece is important, and I think if you don't explain the reasoning behind it, it can be like, "Oh, I've done this whole thing wrong." Like that's why you're giving feedback. So that is like the missing piece, I feel like. So that's so important.
And even like I have an intern now at my school, and she's like a young adult. And I feel like with her, I feel like I try to be careful, and I'll say to her, I want you to know, like, you're doing a great job. And I don't expect you like to know how to do these things. And so if I give you feedback, it's not like I think you're doing a bad job. It's just that you don't know how to do this and I want you to grow. But I do think I have to be explicit with that. Like I can't just always just be like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, without sometimes going back and saying those statements to her.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that really plays into both resilience and grit is the mindset. Can you talk about what the differences between a person with a growth mindset and a fixed mindset are? And what are some ways to move into that growth mindset if you sort of fall into the fixed category?
Right. So a growth mindset, and I think Kara Dweck is put that on the mat. And but David Yeager, the one explained to you about that with the 10 to 25, he's actually a student of hers and sort of expanded on that. So growth mindset is a belief about the brain, which is that it's a belief that your brain can kind of change and grow. Whereas a fixed mindset is a belief that your brain is what your brain is. Like you're either good at math or you're good at swimming, you're good at singing, or you're not. And so, what we want to encourage kids to do is that if, let's say, they are challenging, like they're having challenges in math, is that they're not like just good at that or not, but that when they put in effort and strategies and get support, then they can get better and their brain can get better at math. Now, like there probably are people who are like, there's not to take away from talent at all. Like there is some talent involved, but a lot of times, especially with a thing like math, what you'll see is that a lot of kids, they think that they're bad at math. They stop doing math. They stop doing practice of math. And then they are getting weaker and weaker at math. But it becomes like a negative recursive process as opposed to a positive recursive process.
And you mentioned ACT earlier. Does this play into psychological flexibility, this growth mindset?
So flexibility, I mean, I do think that flexibility is a big component about being resilient. I think that in life, every day I have to be flexible. I think I'm going to do this and something else happens and my day goes by. And I think that if you're demanding and you're just saying it has to be this way, I think that's again a mindset that's going to get you into trouble. But if you can be flexible in the way you think about things, or sometimes I also talk about in the book about and I've said it a lot even in our conversation today, like that both things can be true. That encourages a more flexible way of thinking. And I think even just today, I feel like people are very polarized, and I don't think it's something that's hard for people to think flexibly and to think about dialectically. But I think it's our job to sort of encourage that.
Yeah, and you just mentioned what I wanted to ask you about next is the power of and yet. You mentioned this in both of your books. So I wanted to know if you could say more about that and what does it look like in practice?
So in practice is a lot like if you actually probably listen to our conversation, I've used the word and a lot. Like I do think that sharing with people that both things can be true and not using the word but. So using and where you would use but. So you could be like think of things like, and you asked me about like what a parent can do or a teacher can do that's helpful or not helpful. So a lot of times I think a teacher will be, or a parent will say, oh, I know you're sad, but you have to go to school. Versus, I know you're sad. I can see you're really sad. And it's really important that you can go to school. And I know you can do hard things. See, that sounds different. What happens is you say, but it's like the first thing that you said before is like kick to the curve. As opposed to, and it's like you're allowing kids to hold both things in their mind. And both things are true. And then yet, by saying yet, that's a lot about like a growth mindset. So yet means that you're just not there yet. So let's say, for example, if you are, I've been recently trying to do a lot more weight training, and I, can lift only 10 pounds and I really want to do 20 pounds. So I'm just not there yet, as opposed to thinking I'm never going to be there. By simply adding the word yet, it allows you to think like you're on a road, as opposed to having like you're either there or you're not.
I love that, such a small shift. And this is kind of related, probably not, but like one thing that I noticed myself doing is saying sorry a lot. And I tried to shift it because I was trying to understand why I was just apologizing a lot to my husband in particular for helping me. I was like, oh, sorry, you have to do this. But then I turned it and I made it into thank you instead, which is really what I was trying to do. And so I think that's so powerful, that small shift of but into and, or adding yet is just so powerful in, working through those thought traps that you can get into with the negative thinking. So we've already talked a lot about gritty mindset, but I want to talk about, what does it mean to have gritty behavior?
Right. So, gritty behavior or resilient behavior, I'm a big believer that yes, it's important. We need support. We need also, we didn't talk a little bit like also like emotions. Like, I do think that it's important to both have up the positive emotions and deal with the negative emotions. And then I also think, like in my resilient workbook for kids, I have like these different like sections. So it's about emotions and it's about mindset. But the next session to what you're saying about is about behavior. So both in the Grit Guide for Teens and the Resilient Workbook for Kids, I talk about like, yeah, we can talk about it, but if you don't then live it or do it, it's only going to get you so far. And I often use the analogy of like, if I had a swim teacher and she was like, okay, we're going to like talk about the breaststroke and we're going to talk about, or like a tennis person, and we didn't go in the pool or on the court, I'm only going to improve so much. So I think that the next step is to actually do it. So, how do we how do we help kids to have brave behavior? How do we have kids, like if we want them to have more grit socially, how do we make sure that that kid goes out there and not just talks about it with me, but goes in there and then looks that person in the eye or asks that person a question or things like that? So we have to then take these mindset and all these things we're talking about and turn it into behaviors.
Yeah, and as we're talking about behaviors, you talk about deliberate practice. Can you say more about what that is? And you mentioned a formula in your book about it as well, if you don't mind sharing that.
So the deliberate practice is this idea about what kind of practice is helpful. Like there's been like a lot of study about practice. And so one of the things we know is that when we try to practice, what we need to do is we need to like hone in on like the one little thing that might be a little off. And then we often have to practice it over and over and over again and get feedback and support on that thing. Because sometimes like if you, let's say for example, I play tennis and my weakness is my serve. But maybe I don't want to practice my serve. I'd rather do my forehand because that's easy, but that's not going to really improve my game. But what deliberate practice would be like, okay, we're going to talk about your serve. We're going to be really specific, and we're going to notice that your toss is too low. So over and over again, you're going to keep throwing that ball, so you get that muscle memory. And then I'm going to get feedback on that. So that's like kind of the formula. And it's not actually that enjoyable to do it. So people can't do it for a long time. But if you practice like that, what we've seen is that people who are really exceptional in their field, that's how they practice. They do this thing called deliberate practice.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes along with the idea of grit as a habit, which I find really compelling as a concept. And then what are some other ways that you recommend to sort of bring this habit of grit in?
What you really want ultimately to do with something like grit, because it isn't so easy to make things that are difficult and to do difficult things. But if you make it into a habit, it almost bypass some of that difficultness. So, for example, like I have a habit that every Sunday I go to the gym. Like that's a habit. I don't even think about it now. So even though it might look to somebody else like, oh, every day she does this thing, I was like, no, it's my habit. So if you can help kids or teens and adults take something that they're a goal that they really want to and make it into a habit, it takes some of the challenge out of it. And so that's what you really want to encourage. Like the same thing about schoolwork. Like let's say you have a habit that every time you come home, you open up your books and like for the first hour you do that. And that's just what you do. You just do it. Just do it. It doesn't feel like the same level of challenge as if every time it's like you do it sometimes this way and sometimes that way, then that's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, you're not having to start fresh each time. And one thing we haven't talked about is sort of environmental. I wondered if you could talk about the role that environment plays, particularly in resilience.
Right. So I think that, like, for both grit and for resilience, I think that sometimes some of the controversy around both grit and resilience is that, and I agree with this, is that the last thing I would want to say is that people who are having challenges is that just to say this is an individual issue, or when kids have tragedy happen, like they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. That's never been my way of thinking about this. And so I do think that there are things that the individual can do, like the mindset and the behavior and the emotions and the support, all those things we said. But I think that it's also such an important message that if we really want kids and teens to be resilient and gritty, we need to set up environments that set the stage for that. And that it's not just an individual issue, but it's really a collective issue. And that those environments that are going to support that are going to have the best results than just say to individuals that they need to do this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the role of mindfulness and gratitude, how are those two things related to grit and resilience, and how can they sort of give us that extra little push that we need?
Right. So mindfulness, like by definition, is well. Let's break both of them down because I think they're a little. They both have important things to say. So mindfulness, by definition, is being in the moment without judgment, right? And so when we are like when we're struggling, like a lot of times we're very judgy, or when we're like kind of falling into those problematic P's, we are not, especially the one about being permanent. We are not in the moment. So, if we have a mindfulness practice, if we have a way of being in the world where we just notice things and we stay in this moment, it's going to allow us to be able to handle things in a much more productive way. So, if people, so, and again, I often say to people with mindfulness that it is a practice. Like the way you're going to be more successful about mindfulness is not just think, oh, I'm stressed, let me just be mindful right now, or do my like 10-minute meditation. But if you have that as a practice, then when you have that event happen, or you're dealing with something that's hard and you want to deal with it, you want your instant gratification to come in, or you want to just like you're having a hard time with stress. If you can approach it in that mindful way, you're going to be able to cope with it much more effectively, and you're going to be able to do harder things. In terms of gratitude, I think that gratitude helps with both grit and resilience in that when we're grateful, it also makes us feel have like more positive emotions. And when we have more positive emotions, we are in a better place again to do harder things and to cope with difficult things. I think it also shines a light in like what's working versus what's not working. And I think when we can again think about this in a more positive mindset, I think that that can be helpful. I do think that one thing I do want to say, and I also do share this also even with my students, is that we want to stay away from like what I call toxic positivity. I think that's different than gratitude. Toxic positivity is like that Pollyanna, like, oh, everything's going to be okay, or that kind of stuff. I feel like that feels very disingenuous and it doesn't really make people feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like gratitude is a good place for us to wrap up unless you have any final thoughts for the listeners, Karen.
No, as I said, I am grateful for the opportunity to share my thoughts. I think these times it's really important. Both those concepts are really important for us to dealing with hard things and doing with like things that are going to feel good in the long term. And again, with us being able to cope with stress, which is really what resilience is all about. But again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk with everybody.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thanks for your work and for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Fun and easy skills to help kids bounce back from stress and rebound from adversity. As a parent, you want to protect your child from life's difficulties, but this isn't always possible. In order to face the uncertainty and inevitable setbacks of life with confidence, children need the right tools. The good news is that you can give them these tools. Designed for kids ages 7 to 12, this workbook provides actionable techniques to help kids cope with stress, manage powerful emotions, and grow through life's challenges. The Resilience Workbook for Kids offers engaging activities grounded in evidence based cognitive behavioral therapy and positive psychology to help your child recover from difficult experiences. Your child will learn how to make friends with their emotions, focus on things in life that make them happy, and connect with what really matters to them. Finally, your child will discover how helping others can make them feel good about themselves so they can move beyond feelings like sadness, fear, and anger. Resilience can help kids stay strong and recover from the psychological impact of stress. This workbook will help your child find the tools needed to build resilience in the face of stress so they can bounce back even better. In these increasingly challenging times, kids and teens need mental health resources more than ever. With more than 1.6 million copies sold worldwide, Instant Help books are easy to use, proven effective, and recommended by therapists. Visit our website at www.newharbinger.com and use coupon code podcast25 to receive 25% off your entire order. New Harbinger Publications is an independent, employee owned publisher of books on psychology, health, spirituality, and personal growth. For over 50 years, our evidence-based self-help books and pioneering workbooks have helped readers make positive changes to improve mental health and well-being. Founded by psychologists Matthew McKay and Patrick Fanning, New Harbinger is proud to be an employee-owned company. Our books reflect our core values of integrity, sustainability, compassion, and trust. Written by leaders in the field and recommended by therapists worldwide, New Harbinger books are practical, accessible, and provide real tools for real change. Join the New Harbinger Clinicians Club, a free membership club exclusively for mental health professionals. Sign up today and you'll receive a special welcome gift, 35% off all professional books, free client resources, free ebooks throughout the year, access to private sales, a subscription to our Quick Tips for Therapists email program, and more. Visit newharbinger.com/clinicians-club for more information. Do you have an idea for another episode? Do you want to send us a message? Our email address is podcast@newharbinger.com. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Jesse Fancushion. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed to the show, and we hope that you might share it with anyone who could benefit from the content. This podcast is not a substitute for counseling with a licensed provider.